Welcome to Sober Solutions. We are a weekly recovery podcast not affiliated with any particular 12-step or recovery program. However, you may hear us mention them. My name is Jason, and I'm an alcoholic and addict.
My name is Chris, and I'm an alcoholic and addict.
My name is Ben. I'm an alcoholic and addict.
And welcome back to Sober Solutions Podcast. Tonight is episode 41. And I am very ready for this topic tonight. Tonight's topic is around stress and anger. And man, I had such a stressful day today. I've had a stressful week, to be quite honest. Work has been incredibly wonderful. I absolutely love the job that I have. And I think that I've already worked about 60 hours, and it's only Thursday. It has been nonstop, back to back, meetings all day, requests going till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. And it has been incredibly stressful at work. Not only that, but I am COVID positive. And so I'm not just trying to barrel through work and get all my assignments done, start up new projects because it's the beginning of the year. But my body is just fighting me at every single turn. It has not been fun. Thankfully, I'm vaccinated and boosted, so I'm not having the symptoms of what it could be, but it's still so incredibly bad. I think that's also adding to the stress because I started getting into this new gym routine where I would wake up early and I would go to the gym in the morning and do some cardio, come home, start my day, do my work, go to the gym in the evening, do some weightlifting and stuff, and then have dinner, go to bed. I do not do well with my schedule being out of whack. I'm now sober almost 17 and a half months, and it is down to a T. My schedule is, I live and die by my schedule, and when it's not something that I'm used to doing, like being tired, I walked to the mailbox today and I'm winded. That just takes me out of my normal day-to-day routine. And talk about angry. I got very angry today. With people's, as I put it, people's incompetence. I ordered something online and that didn't turn out for me, and then I had a conversation with someone and that didn't turn out for me, and I could just feel myself starting to fume. Because I expected these people just to deliver. And one of them was a DoorDasher, and I just wanted them just to, something simple, just deliver. And they couldn't even do that. So I eventually calmed down and had a very professional, relaxing conversation with their customer service and got it resolved. But I, in the moment, was furious, and I can't remember the last time that I was this angry at things outside of my control. And that's the point. When I get stressed and when I get angry, it means that I'm trying to control things to such a minute detail that when something just moves off the page or something just doesn't go right, and I'm not in that control, everything goes to shit. And that's when I move from stressed to angry. And so it's really something that now, having the 17 plus months that I have, I can step back from and see where I'm starting to go off the rail. I started noticing it in a couple conversations, but then I really noticed it when I had about maybe 2 or 3 minutes in between meetings. I sat back and I said to myself, wow, I could really get fucked up right now. And that really kind of snapped me out of it, snapped me back into reality. And fortunately, it was just a thought and a passing thought. It never became an obsession or a craving or anything that I've been thinking about since. And I really attribute that to the fact that I work a very strong program. I actually reached out to a couple people and just got my mind off of the things that I was doing, the things that were stressing me out, the things that were making me angry, and put myself back into a mindset of what do I need to do? How do I need to do it? Am I doing the best that I can? And really starting to coach myself and talk to myself and get myself off of that ledge of stress and anger so that that thought didn't become an obsession. Because knowing me, my obsession would take me out again, and I've said this many times on this program. I've said this to many of my friends. I have another relapse in me, but I don't have another recovery. And so I'm going to do everything that it takes to maintain my sobriety and stay sober. But I'd like to hear from you guys tonight. What is it that makes you stressed or angry?
So I kind of differentiate the two, where anger is my reaction, and stress is one of the things that can cause it. And they're not mutually exclusive for me. They're not just because I'm stressed doesn't mean I'll get angry, or just because I'm angry doesn't mean it's the result of stress. But I think a lot of I've been able to avoid a lot of the little things really bothering me because of how much I read 417 and practice acceptance. I think if there was a cornerstone of my program, it would be that. Just because the idea that I think it's close to what you said, Jason, about control. When we don't, even if we're not meaning to control things, even if things start to go the way that I don't think that they should go, then it aggravates me. And it can start as something little. One of the things that's been, kind of over the past probably month and a half, I had consulted with my doctor, and I had been on anxiety medication, a low dose, and I said, I'll try coming off of it, and he was like, yeah, that's fine. And I didn't notice any significant changes, except it was I could definitely, I don't know if I didn't want to admit that I was becoming more agitated at little things, but it was definitely noticeable to, my girlfriend actually said something about it. I talked to my therapist about it, and long story short, I went back on my meds just to see if, that alleviated some of it. But yeah, I think that was probably the scarier thing for me, is that I didn't find myself getting in these big, angry, resentful places. I got in these kind of just irked by little things, and not really not really noticing it. It's like it's kind of not to make a counterpoint of what you said, Jason, but I like stuff like that. Delivery guy shows up late, like I wouldn't let that stuff bother me, but I would let something that somebody said, affect me, but I wouldn't let it affect me outwardly. And so those kind of things would just kind of build one on another over a period of time, not like in a day. I never found myself going, "Oh, I had a crap day today," but I just kind of felt in this funk, in this fog. And so one of the things to help me get out of that is, absolutely sharing about it, whether that's in a meeting. Although I find that stuff like that is I'm better served with a therapist, because in the rooms, people are there to listen, but they're not really there to offer solutions. You know, because everybody has their own crap. So it's a yeah. For me, I prefer a licensed professional for stuff like that.
So you mentioned like the little things that build up, And I think that was like what happened to me today. It wasn't just the delivery guy, it wasn't just one conversation. It was like four or five things in a span of like 20 minutes. And by the way, I still had to be in a meeting presenting something, and someone's asking for a report, and like all of those things just start happening all at once. So I totally get that feeling. It's interesting that you said I internalize it and I carry it on. And so do you recognize yourself doing that more or less now that you're sober?
I would have to say more, only because I'm aware of it. So like before, being in like a constant drunken haze, you know, I that kind of stuff, I didn't notice it until the outburst. I didn't recognize that those outbursts were a culmination of little things, as opposed to now where I'm, you know, just in this, incredibly reflective state where I look at those little things internally and I just go, well, that's a little tiny thing. What the hell am I going to do with that? Like I'm not going to, I'm not going to make a mountain out of a molehill. I'm not going to, go over the top trying to either fix this or complain about it. I'm just going to, you know, brush it aside and move on. The problem is if I brush it aside too many times, it's, I could see how, being sober, those, those little things building up. For me now, it becomes that thing where like, okay, I just have to talk about this. I just have to get this out, as opposed to when I was drinking, where I didn't really have a decision. It would be like, maybe the 50th little thing that lit that fuse, and depending on how much I had drank, that would determine how much I overreacted or how angry I got. And so, I definitely notice it more now, which I think is a good thing, but I'm not sure.
I was actually just gonna comment on that. So I think it's, or at least what it sounds like to me, it's not that you're holding it in, but it's more awareness. And
Yeah.
instead of just, rattling off a rude comment or reacting, you're internalizing what happened, processing what happened, and then being able to have a sober reaction to it, as opposed to letting all those little things build up inside you, and then one day, boom, your head just blows off.
That also used to be your thing, right, Ben? I think you've talked about that. You used to make comments, snarky comments or sarcastic comments
Yeah,
constantly.
no,
And
1,000%. That would absolutely be, you know, but like my go-to of just like if you said something I didn't like I was gonna come back and be smarter than you or mean. Like I would just be mean and cutting and so yeah. So like to be void of that is really it's a really like nice feeling. It's weird because it's something that maybe people notice, but maybe they don't. But it's also not a thing that I could go around saying, "Hey, I'm do you notice that I'm not a big jackass anymore? No, yeah, no, and so for me, it's kind of one of those things that like I don't know, I think I struggle with it, but it is one of those ego, those false ego things where we're like, oh, we're just working a program, just doing great, and in the background we're like, doesn't anybody see how much I've changed? It's all different. Don't you notice me? Oh, right, sorry.
I totally understand that. I totally understand that. Chris, how about you? I think you and I have very similar temperaments in the sense that, and I think you said this on the program, that you can go 0 to 60 real quick, right? And I'm the same way. I'm the same way. But what is it that makes you stressed or angry?
yeah, I am emulating your week as well. I actually have COVID as well, so we are 50% strong COVID positive on this show. I definitely also have a culmination of a lot of stressful things going on. And your story made me, I was firing down some notes, and it really made me think that um, stress and anger are very, very powerful emotions. And if I can think back to all of my relapses and most of the relapses that people around me have, they were they were rooted within stress and anger, or at least a lot of them were. And I also think they're sometimes hard, at least when you're feeling it, it's hard to identify until sometimes it's too late unless you're working a program, kind of like what you were saying, Jason. You know, it got you to a point, someone who has a very strong program, to actually think about drinking and quote unquote getting fucked up today, like you said, right? And I don't think I've heard you say that. Well, I don't even remember hearing you say that. So it got to the point, these strong emotions, that you were thinking about that. So that's just something I was reflecting on when you were talking. But stuff that gets me, I guess, stressed or angry, control, definitely. I wrote down a list of like 8 things, and I'm looking down on it, and 3 of them say control of some sort. When I don't have control over a situation, over a disagreement with a person, over, uh, a conversation with a family member, that definitely gets me both stressed and sometimes angry, depending on the situation. I think not having control over the future. I mean, that I constantly struggle with thinking about the future and not being present. That's something I've talked about a lot. Is the thing that helps me with my sobriety the most is staying present. And then I think just conflict in general. I use sarcasm a lot in my daily life. So anytime there's conflict, that gets me a little stressed, angry, if I don't have control in that situation, once again, with another person.
You mentioned something around resentment and anger and stress and how they're really tied closely together. And I was thinking about that, and I just wrote down, stress and anger has a root of resentment, and then fear is the root of resentment. And, it's really interesting having me think about that, because all day today, I could pinpoint where I was fearful. Like something wasn't getting delivered. I was afraid that I was gonna, not get that money back, or not get the product that I wanted. Um, I was having that conversation, and I was fearful that I wasn't doing my job well, and I can see how fear really fueled my stress and anxiety and anger today. So I think that's a really, really important point.
I also think that stress and anger, it has a negative connotation, but similar to anxiety, if it's used properly, it could be a good thing. When we talk about stress and anger, everyone's head automatically goes to bad, right? But everyone feels anger at some point. Everyone feels stressed. And if you have a way of identifying stress, identifying anger, you can use that for your betterment. If you're stressed, there's probably a reason, and you probably have to do something in order to counter that. Same with anger. Maybe it's time to have that conversation that you didn't want to have. Maybe it's time that you remove yourself from a situation. But it's definitely something that those emotions, although have a negative connotation, definitely can be positive as well.
So talk to me a little bit more about that. This concept of healthy stress and anxiety, or more accurately, healthy stress and anger. Do you think that there is healthy stress?
I think there's healthy stress. I mean, if you are not stressed, if you're living a lackadaisy life and everything is easy, you're not really pushing yourself, right? I think that's a good gauge of both, if you're pushing yourself to the best of your ability, both, whether it's in a relationship or at a job or at the gym. I mean, imagine going to the gym and never feeling sore, right? You're probably not doing enough at that gym. You're probably not pushing your body to the fullest potential. On the contrary, if you're leaving the gym hurt and in pain, you're doing something wrong. So there's a healthy line of identifying the level of stress. And anger, I think, is a little harder in the positive sense, but at least with anger, you can identify a situation that's unhealthy or identify a situation that maybe you have to fix in some regard.
I think that's a perfect analogy. Thinking about it as a muscle that you work in the gym. You get it to a point that it is stressed, but not torn. And you want that feeling of growth, but not going so hard that you're out of the gym for a month. So I think that's a perfect analogy. Ben, what do you think about this concept of healthy versus unhealthy stress and anger? And what are some of the techniques that you use to manage your stress or anger?
Um, yeah, I agree to a certain extent about healthy stress. Yes, it's a very good analogy, Christopher. It's a very good analogy. I just I don't know how much I think for me that goes a little too deep in that I don't know if I would actively be trying to create any type of stress in a relationship. I think for me, it's more about just identifying it and being honest about it and sharing about it. Like for me, that's like far bigger than the solution. It's because I think what Chris is talking about is the solution, which if you're feel able enough to try to fix it, then great. For me, I think it's more so about identifying the problem first, before I can even get to a solution. And so pretty good example was last weekend. I was just not in a great mood, and me and my girlfriend were driving, and she was asked me what was wrong, and I was being short, and I said, look, I'm just mad. I'm just mad about I was mad about a particular thing, and I said that's it. There's nothing, you know. I don't mean to take it out on you or anybody else, but I'm just mad. Like, and for me, that's that's miles ahead of where I was. Where I'm able to, you know, you know, feel that, express it, and acknowledge it. Um, that for me is, like I said, it's just miles ahead of where I was, because that's something that I could have internalized and just, nah, nothing's wrong, because it had nothing to do with her. It was something entirely different, and so it me just acknowledging that was, sometimes that's a more important step than me trying to, like I said, fix whatever the underlying cause of the issue was. Um, but yeah, I mean, I would say it's. I don't know if I have tips or tricks or techniques that I use. I mean, I'll go back to it again. Therapy, massive, just a massive help, um, because they, for me, therapy allows me to just kind of word vomit everything out there, and then they're able to take the pieces and kind of hone in on one or two things and say, let's look at this. And it kind of focuses you, because if you guys are anything like me, we'll start throwing our shit in the middle of the room, and then you know either we're looking for other people to agree with us, we want to be in that vacuum where other people see our side, or we want people to feel sorry for us, and that only gets you so far. That either validates your feelings or it gets you even angrier. So yeah, I think having a weekly therapy session for me is a monumental piece to the puzzle, because and look, it also is important to, like we talk about with sponsors and stuff. Like, if you got to find the right sponsor, you got to find the right therapist, you got to find somebody you trust, and that you're willing to be completely vulnerable and completely honest, because otherwise, like, I've had therapists that I've worked with that I've kept them at arm's length for whatever reason, just because I wasn't sure of the advice that they were going to give, and those were, therapeutic relationships that didn't work out. But yeah, in order to help identify those feelings, um, that is a massive help. But outside of that, in the moment, I try to sit back and I try to, you know, I said it I think on the last podcast or maybe a couple podcasts ago that I try to sit with whatever the emotion is, and try to think about it in classic addict fashion. I try to overthink my way out of the problem, and usually it doesn't do me much good. But usually it's enough. It's a long enough period of time to take me out of that to what you were saying before, Jason, about being in that moment of just like I'd rather go out. You know, usually just kind of turning it in on itself helps me look at it and takes me out of that idea of running away from it. So this way it's no longer about what substance can I use to mask this. It's what behaviors can I change to fix this.
I loved what you were talking about in the sense that you allow yourself to just be mad. I think that's the technique that I use the most. The healthiest technique that I use the most is I allow myself to be, insert emotion here. Angry, sad, happy, and I never used to allow myself to feel those emotions. Now, being an alcoholic and addict, sometimes I can't automatically pinpoint the reason behind my emotion, like stress and anger. And most of the time, I get there pretty quickly now. But I truly allow myself to do that. I have even told people this before, that if I'm, say, stressed or angry, I say to myself, okay, you're allowed to be in this feeling until 48 hours or 72 hours or however long that I feel like I need to work through that. And I just get to be stressed and angry that whole time. And I don't make myself wrong about it. I don't care who tries to coach me out of it. I explain to them that I'm sitting in this emotion and I'm allowing myself to do that. And at the same time, at the end of my timeline, I have to be done with it. I have to, because that's my commitment to myself. And so most of the time these days, I am well out of that emotion by the time that my deadline comes. I'm pretty much on a 24-hour cycle now. I feel that feeling, I experience that emotion, and then boom, I'm done. And I'm allowing myself to then move on, because I think that if I sit in the anger, if I sit in the resentment, if I sit in the stress, then it's just going to fester and create itself into something else that I may not want. A damaged relationship or something that I can't really pull back at work or something like that. And I would rather allow myself the time to get through it and really go through it than have to go back and make an amends. I really try and live my life now where I look at things of, if I do A, will I have to make an amends? Or if I do B, will I have to make an amends? And if it's one or the other is no, you won't have to, because you've lived an authentic life and told an authentic story and told your truth and all the things, then I choose that option. So that's my way of really coping and looking at situations like that. Outside of that, I tend to generate a lot of energy when I get stressed and angry. And the gym has been a great relief of all of that pent up energy, which makes having COVID suck, because now it's just like sitting here and I can't go out to the gym and I can't go out doing stuff, and like I get winded going to the freaking mailbox, so I can't really go out and like spend that energy. And so I have to think about how I'm going to do that in other ways. Um, Sometimes it's like sitting and just watching a funny movie and expending energy through laughter. I watched a sad show the other day and I expended that energy through crying. And it's all around really being able to find different healthy ways to take that energy and redistribute it. So, Chris, what are some of your healthy techniques to deal with this stress and anger?
Yeah, real quick, I just want to comment on what you said about allowing yourself to feel feelings. Something that my wife and I are really trying to do with our daughter and eventually more our son is not scold or take our daughter out of that place when she starts having a meltdown or crying. Meltdowns are a little different, but there's times, where she's sad or she's crying or she's 5 years old. She's learning how to live. She's only been on the planet very few times. And you see parents a lot of times, whenever their kids cry, say, stop crying. Why are you crying? Don't do that, XYZ. And it's a reaction to do that. I have to say, like, whenever she's crying, my initial reaction is to say, please, like, why are you crying? Can I fix it? But what we're really trying to do is reinforce that it's okay, like you're saying, to feel what you're feeling and identify it. So now we're trying to say, like, why are you feeling like this? Can you verbalize it? And sometimes they can't. They're 5 years old, but she's getting better at saying, well, you're spending time with my brother and I wanted, I was jealous. And just having a 5-year old identify a feeling like that is amazing. So I think it goes hand in hand with, 30, 40 year olds too, because I know I was never taught to do that. When I grew up, it was don't cry, don't show emotion, boys don't cry, blah, blah, blah. And that's definitely not healthy. And, that manifests definitely it accelerates with our addiction. And, through recovery, I'm learning to identify emotion and sit in that emotion. So I just wanted to comment on that. But
Before you go into the next thing, I think it's a huge point. When we're younger, that's when we're starting to really grow and develop and learn how to do things. And I had a very similar growing up in terms of like stop crying or stop being angry or stop whatever that emotion was. And as I grew up and I grew into this raging alcoholic and drug addict, that stunted all of that growth. And now that I got out of rehab 17 and a half months ago, I have to learn all this shit, and it takes time, but allowing ourselves to do that and being gentle with ourselves as we learn how to handle those emotions again, I think is a huge point.
right. Some ways that I deal with stress, and I agree with you. I think the physical is huge. When I am not physically active, when I am not eating well, when I am not sleeping well, I am so much more irritable. I am so much more stressed. I don't feel good. However, you take the opposite when I am working out on a consistent basis, when I'm eating healthy, when I get 7, 8 hours of sleep a night, I'm a completely different person. And I mean, there's just straight up science behind that. So I think the physical is a huge thing in my life. The last month between my wife having COVID, myself having COVID, I haven't been able to do that. And it's reflected in my day to day stress. You know, I've, I agree with you. Like, I need to get back to the gym because every day I'm like, oh, I just want to get to the gym. I want to get back to my routine. Other ways to deal with anger, I think, for me, are volunteering or helping people or talking to people. And you never see someone, you will I challenge anyone to find an angry person while you're helping someone at a church or a food bank or whatever. It's just almost impossible. So, like, doing things to help people, and you don't even have to go to a food bank. You could literally call someone and just say, hey, how's your day? And that, stuff like that is really how I combat the stress and anger in my life.
Yeah, you had a lot of good points there. I mean, I don't even want to try to do that. Go to a soup kitchen and try to find the person that's unhappy. That seems like a pretty fruitless exercise. Um, but but yeah, I think for me, one of the routine is very helpful, um, and whether that's just downtime after work or just my routine in the morning, just kind of getting those little things right at the start of the day, they just really help. And so just and I think that's one of the things that I really enjoyed. I can't believe I'm gonna say this. Really enjoyed about rehab was the structure and the the routine of every morning. You know, Medline, coffee, breakfast. Like just getting that consistent structure. It put me in a place of just kind of relaxation, and so so now I'll get up for work, get dressed, leave for work, and then turn on my morning meeting on my half-hour drive and start by taking that in the morning, and stuff like that just helps me get into a mindset that is much healthier. Um, you know, you guys have mentioned the gym, just staying active. We've talked about it a bunch of times. Getting in leagues and getting in social situations that are healthy and positive. Just having those things to maintain. I think Chris, you were touching on this before. Just maintain that balance, and then this way, you know, it's easier for me when I can identify what's going right, what's making my life better, and there's a structure or a balance associated with it. And so then when I feel something off, I can turn and I can analyze that structure or that framework and look at what's changed. And I think to circle back, as we say, to what I said at the very beginning, about my meds. I think that's a perfect example. Like, you know, being on a medication, taking it every day, it was a part of my routine. And then removing it was, and again, it wasn't done rashly. It wasn't done haphazardly. It was, done in consultation with my doctor. But there was a noticeable difference. Obviously, whether it was as noticeable to me as it was to others, that's, neither here nor there. But, so now I have something that I can identify and turn and go, okay, well, you changed this about your routine. This happened. Let's reevaluate that part of the routine and see if something changes.
So I think awareness is a huge part of this. And before we wrap tonight, I'm just interested to hear how each of you identify not necessarily the triggers, but kind of the indicators of how you start losing control of your stress or anger. And that can be emotionally, mentally, physical indicators. But what are some of the warning signs that you have identified, Ben, that really show you that, okay, now I know I'm starting to lose it?
I think that it is very much for me an internal feeling of just a heaviness, a I can feel sadness, I can feel more negative emotions, um, as opposed to you know and I again, going back to something that I think Chris had mentioned early on, that the ability to stay present. If I'm too much in my emotions, and I think one of the things that makes me aware is when I'm being, like, trying to be have so much awareness, because then I'm overanalyzing. I'm looking really deep into things, and I can kind of feel myself in that emotional mud, and that usually for me is one of the first indicators. But going to something you said, Jason, about, it takes time to learn these things. It really does take time to learn these things, because I think I'm well out of the phase of being okay with being an emotion. Like, that was one of the very first things. Like, just being okay, just experiencing them, not like dealing with them in any way, shape, or form, just experiencing them for the first time. And then again, just getting more experience experiencing them, and having more time, and literally, getting more reps, feeling sad, feeling happy, feeling lonely, feeling tired, feeling scared, and just it just takes time to learn, what the other triggers are, what the other things that just, are going to start to build up, that lead up to, an outburst or an emotional overreaction.
I totally get that. Acknowledging those feelings and identifying what they are. Now that we're sober, we can start to put our finger on that. I know for me, some of the indicators is my body starts tensing up. I start losing any sort of patience with, kind of nonsense small talk. I have like these physical indicators. Like sometimes I start like getting heated, like my body will start feeling heated. But Chris, what does it feel like for you when you notice yourself starting to lose that control over that stress and anger?
You guys touched on them, the physical. I don't really get this heated thing. I start sweating in my right armpit. It's really weird, but just the right one.
Oh, just the right one. Okay.
Yeah, it is really weird. So when I actually get like stressed or really angry, there's definitely some sweating. I become very like have some insomnia. I start overthinking at night. So I'll sit there and I'll send myself a million emails. Remember to do this, do this. I'll have to get up and write it down, because if I don't write it down or I don't send that email, I'll just think about it for another 2 hours. And that's a big one for me. When I am constantly sending, sometimes I'll wake up and have 15 emails to myself. And that's when I know I'm in I would say, very high stressed state of life. Another thing is just when I'm irritable. I mean, it's pretty easy for me to recognize when I'm irritable with people, because I think that my irritability comes off very strong. My wife can definitely attest to that. You guys could probably attest to that. I become a little less playfully snarky and maybe a little more mean. Um, and, I just think that in general, I start arguing more. That's really not healthy. And lastly, one thing that I notice that I do is in certain situations, I try to fix things that don't need to be fixed. I'll find myself, and this is really with the relationships in my life. When people talk to me, I'll start firing off how to fix everything in their life, when deep down, I'm just thinking about how I need to fix my own stuff. But I don't want to fix it, or I can't fix it, and I don't have that control. So, me trying to gain that control is by fixing everyone else's stuff.
Yeah, I can really identify with the email. I learned early on in my career it's never good to just shoot an email off to someone without sitting on it and thinking about it and letting it maybe sit overnight. Thankfully, now they have the recall button, which I've had to use at least twice today. But I think that at the same time, I loved your self reflection of like how you change your personality when you are losing that control of that stress and anger. Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great place to stop tonight, guys. Really interesting way to end my day. And I think that this has helped a little bit. I have given myself until I go to bed, or excuse me, until I wake up, to still feel that stress and anger. So I'm still sitting in it. But par for course. I have started to relax on that a little bit and get through that emotion. So I'm not as stressed out or angry as I was probably 2 hours ago. So thanks for helping me get through that. And as always, each and every one of our episodes is dedicated to the still sick and suffering alcoholic and addict, especially the individual who's going to pick up for the first time tonight. Have a good night, guys.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
We appreciate your liking and subscribing to our podcast. If you liked what you heard today and would like to support our podcast, feel free to Venmo $1 to our virtual basket at Sober Solutions Podcast. We want to hear from you too. If you have a comment, question, topic, or would like to come on the show, find us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Sober Solutions Podcast. Or you can shoot us an email to sobersolutionspodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And if you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show.